Hello, folks. Um, this is not the video you probably are expecting as an update from the AT, but I found out recently that I need more help from you folks. My friends and my family, you've all been so supportive of me in getting over my deep depression that I've decided to share more with you. Um, I need your help. I know how encouraging you're going to be, and I'm relying on you for this. I was at our recent General Assembly in Detroit, and I had a traumatic experience. I don't know if you've been reading the news or listening to things called trigger events, but I experienced one. There was a case out of Atlanta about a pastor who had a long career as a pedophile stretching back into the 1980s. And that wasn't what traumatized me. I read the description, which was pretty graphic in the legal brief that came out of the Presbytery of Greater Atlanta. And that was fine. That wasn't a problem. But I was assigned to the committee to deal with this issue. And I found in the committee, this is a bunch of prestigious people in the Presbyterian Church USA, pastors, elders. And in the committee's discussion, they didn't seem to want to put a regulation into our Constitution that would restrict and essentially make kind of a national database of sexual predators in the PCUSA. They wanted to leave that to the presbyteries, and I won't get into all the polity of that. But when I saw a number of important people seemingly not taking this issue as seriously as I thought they should, I ended up being quite traumatized by it. Lost my mind a little bit. And so it caused me to reflect. And since that time, on this first 166 miles on the trail, I've been thinking. And I realized that I need to be honest and open with you folks. The truth of the matter is I have been raped twice by multiple people. The first time was by a man I idolized. I looked up to him a great deal. I loved him. He taught me to play football. And I don't know how many of you folks are from Alabama, but football is pretty important. And I'm not bragging when I said that I had game. But in addition to that, in the winter of 73 to 74, not only did he teach me football, he taught me to smoke marijuana. He taught me to view pornography. And then in the summer of 74, a friend of mine and I, while my parents were at work, we hitchhiked out to his apartment. He had separated from his wife at this time, and he was 22, 23, married too young probably. He had a girlfriend who was about 19, and they gave me Miller malt liquor, 7 of them. I drank them fast and cold and got very drunk, and then he and his girlfriend raped me. I have a prodigious memory, and a lot of times that's very, very handy. Sometimes, though, it makes things difficult. And even though I called him the day after and told him that I didn't remember anything, nonetheless I remember a great deal. I assure you, I was not a willing participant. I won't bore you with the details. I won't traumatize you with the details. But I remember coming to on the bathroom floor. I was going in and out of consciousness, and I was singing the Lord's Prayer. And I was screaming at the top of my lungs, I've sinned, I've sinned, I've sinned. In a consequence, I went running into the church. I figured I had done something terribly bad to deserve this. And I sought forgiveness from God. And I became a very, very very evangelical Christian. Those of you who know me from those times, you'll remember that. The second time was in the fall of 1975. I don't know how many of you remember, but back in the day, nobody knew what lactose intolerance was. I was drinking milk in excess because I was a jock, and it was good for strong bones and good performance, and I kept getting sicker and sicker. In the fall of 75, they put me in the hospital for the first time. And one night after my folks had gone home, two nurses, one an evangelical Christian like myself, we had some conversation, and another nurse, they gave me something in a Coke, and before I blacked out from whatever that sedative was, I remember them in my hospital room undressing and cooing and saying sexy things to me. And they raped me too. And I don't know how many others. The next morning, the evangelical nurse woke me up at 5 o'clock in the morning and gave me 5 enemas. I didn't understand why. I just thought she was sick. I thought she was ill, but while I was unconscious, there's no telling how many people raped me. If any did, I just assumed that there was some reason for those enemas, and I won't go into those details either. I can't describe how traumatized I was by that. This is 40 years ago now. The second one made me question everything about football. I thought that in some way I was too muscular, too attractive, that in some way this was my fault too, that bless their hearts, they just couldn't help themselves. Those of you who remember, you know that I quit football in my junior year. Football had become too much for me. There was too much pain associated with it. You may be saying to yourself, Jeff, why are you doing this on video? And after 40 years, the shame is still too much. I just can't talk face to face about this. Now, about shame. Some people think that shame is a result of doing something bad, that the opposite of shame is moral purity. That's not what shame is about. The opposite of shame is honor. If you're a New Testament scholar, you know this. But in our terms, the opposite of shame is status. Sexual assault, rape, in my mind anyway, seems to be almost always a matter of status in some way. And the act of sexual assault is to push somebody down in their status, to shame them. Like, for instance, if you remember the Steubenville, Ohio case, where you had 2 football players, stars on their team, captains, who brought a lot of status and prestige to their community, state champions or something. They were accused by a young woman of rape. And the slut-shaming that went on. Here's the thing about slut-shaming. It's not about saying that you're a bad, evil person to that girl. It's saying to her, you don't have the right to accuse your betters. You see? You don't have the right to trash these good boys and to bring down our town. See, that's slut-shaming. It's not saying you've done something evil or wicked. It's that you don't deserve to speak out about this. Or think about the Sandusky case at Penn State. Here you have a high-status individual, a guy with a lot of prestige, and he's running a ministry for underprivileged, low-status children. That's like chum in the water for a shark. That's how sexual predators work. They find people lower down the ladder than they are, as for instance my football coach and me, or nurses and me, and they do what they want to satisfy their desires, knowing that there's a good chance that person will be so shamed they will never accost them. They will never accuse them because they feel like they have no right. And that was the case with me. Now, shame voluntarily, let's say this, voluntarily abdicating status is not a bad thing. Not a bad thing at all. It's a good thing. Particularly for those me like a white male privileged person, abdicating status is a good thing. If our Lord, who did not consider it robbery to be considered on an equal status with God the Creator, nonetheless humbled himself to take the lowest status possible, that of a slave, if Christ can do that, why can not we? It's a good thing. The sexual assault is not that way. It forces such shaming on people. And it does it intentionally, and primarily to keep their mouth shut. And that's a very violent, despicable thing. Let's say something about blame. I have spent a long time blaming myself for these. I blamed myself for hitchhiking. I said if I had never hitchhiked, it would never have happened to me. That night in the hospital, I said if I'd never drunk that Coke, this would never happen to me. I was stupid. I shouldn't have done that. I accepted the blame. But understand this. In rape or sexual assault, the only people to blame are the perps. They're the only ones who carry the blame. No one else. No one else. You know, my coach had the opportunity to be a decent human being with me, and he didn't take it. He did not take it. Those nurses, they had a responsibility to care for me. They didn't take it. They are the ones to blame. I don't want to say this. I want to say this to Mom and Dad. I'm so sorry that I have to tell you this way. I love you both very much. John, none of this is your fault. It is not your fault. I want you to know that. Mom, Dad, you both were at work. And you remember what hard-ass teenager I was. You were at work when Randy Blair and I hitchhiked over to his house. You could not have done anything about it. You were not at fault. The same way in the hospital. You know, I'm 15 years old. Are you going to spend the night with me? No. You folks had gone home. You're not at fault in this. The only ones at fault are the ones who did this to me. Let me speak a minute about theology. I will take great offense if anybody ever says to me, this was God's will. This was not God's will. When someone says to a rape victim or a victim of pedophilia or sexual assault, well, it must have been God's will for that to happen to you. What they're also saying is that it is God's will for there to be rapists. And it is God's will for there to be pedophiles. And that is not true. Sexual violence has nothing to do with God's will. It is a deep violation of God's will. God's will for us is to live in shalom, in peace, in wellness, in wholeness with one another, in a deep sense of community where we look out for one another, where we care for one another deeply, and we work to bring out the best in one another. That is God's will. God's will is not to denigrate, to abuse, to force such a shameful status on anyone. It's not. Now, can God bring good things and God's graciousness out of the worst things that happen to us? Yes, of course. That's the case. In my case, I have been very careful with the women in my lives, very careful with Nancy, my wife. And before we were married, very careful not to force myself on anyone, to respect women highly, not to let my body abuse them. And I think that's been good. I have worked real hard to abdicate status. Sometimes I'm not sure that has been so good. I do think I have important things to say and to do, but I have been so afraid that status would lead to sexual abuse on my part, on somebody else. So I have abdicated that. But particularly with junior highs, I have had very successful ministry with junior highs. I've taught them that once they've been confirmed, they've been adults. Just like I teach my children, they're adults in the eyes of the church. And so they don't have to take what an adult says just because an adult says it. And they don't have to do things that an adult tells them to do just because the adult says so. I've taught junior highs to be authentic, to be autonomous, to stand up for themselves, to be active participants. I tried my best to empower them so that what happened to me does not happen to them. God can bring good out of just about anything, but God is not the author of evil ever, ever. So this is the help I need from you, and I know I can count on it because you folks have been so gracious to me. I need you to reassure me first that I'm not a piece of meat, that people do not have a right to my body for their satisfaction. This is still an issue with me. I'm not just a way for people to satisfy their horrible lust. I need you to tell me that I'm more than that. Second thing, I need you to tell your stories. You see, we need to strengthen laws wherever we can. Presbyterian Church needs to strengthen our laws to protect those who are vulnerable to rape or to sexual assault or to pedophilia. We need to strengthen the laws. That's what we need to do. And women and young folks, we need to strengthen you so that you are more empowered, so that this rape culture that we all live in and move in one day passes away. We need to do that. I need for you to tell your stories, though, because we need to go on the offense. You see, those other measures, strengthening laws, teaching people self-defense, those are all defensive measures. And I learned by football, the most you can do with the best defense is tie. We need to go on offense. The offense I propose is for us to all tell our stories. You see, we change the world by telling our stories, one person at a time, until this huge library of individual stories grows and grows and becomes part of our public discourse. And the shame and the violence of rape and pedophilia become things we all get on our radar and we all take more seriously than we do, even me. We tell our stories and we change the world. Stories of pain, yes, this is very painful for me to talk about, but I have hope that if enough of us talk about what happens to us, particularly men, because we men are very silent about this, if we talk about it, we can change. We can change the world we live in. And I want to extend that to the perps. If any of you are rapists or pedophiles, seeing this, I encourage you, self-accuse. Take your punishment, which you deserve. Seek rehabilitation. Seek the grace that God can have to you. And tell your stories about why you do that. Tell your stories about what is inside of you. We need that too. This is very important that we all admit up front that this is a grave sickness in our culture, and that we all take arms together and see if we can change it. Now, I have been very careful not to mention names here. I've been very careful. Perhaps, Coach, you will see this, and perhaps you will do as I suggest. I got to ask you, do you really want to live this hell that you're living. You may have moved on. This is 40 years ago. You may have sought help. You may not be doing this anymore. Those nurses, anyone who is a rapist or a pedophile, do you really want to live that hell? Do you want to continue in that dreadful life that you're living? Don't you want something better? Don't you want something better than those disgusting acts that drive you again and again? Speak out. Self-accuse. Take your punishment. Well, folks, thank you for listening. I'm sorry that this may be very traumatic for you. It certainly is for me. Let's speak out about rape. Let's speak out about pedophilia. Let's bring it out of the shadows into the clear light of day so we can all see it, understand it, overcome it. Thank you all for your help in advance. May the Lord bless you and keep you safe. May the Lord lift God's divine face upon you and give you peace, wellness. May the Lord smile on you with a big smile and be gracious to you, now and forevermore. Amen.